Okay, yeah. And that sheet should be faster. That's also be faster. Okay, so a very warm welcome to all of you. It's lovely. I think I am going to turn that camera around so everybody sees how full this room is. So this is welcome back to the IIT seminar series, the first one of 2023. Second one after we restarted this post the pandemic, and one of our intentions was to have a room full of people. So thanks to all of you for coming and everyone who's joined online as well. So typically what we try to do in the seminar series is to invite people, experts, to speak on topics around gender development and women's economic empowerment at large, and looking at these things through different lenses. Today, as you would have seen in the invite, we are going to try and understand women in STEM, something that's been spoken about for a very long time, but yet there is so much to unearth. And we're very, very lucky to have Nandana here. I'm going to quickly introduce her. Nandana Sengupta is an assistant professor at the School of Public Policy, IIT Delhi. She's an applied econometrician using both machine learning and qualitative techniques to inform her work. Her current research is centered on women in STEM and estimating potential biases embedded in machine learning systems in India. Her broader research agenda lies at the intersection of applied machine learning and economics, with a particular focus on Indian labor markets, survey design, and algorithmic bias. Nandana received her PhD in economics from the Tepper School of Business at Carnegie Mellon University in 2015. Prior to joining IIT Delhi, she was assistant professor at the School of Policy and Governance in Azim Premji University, Bangalore, and a postdoctoral scholar at University of Chicago. Personal anecdote, Nandana happens to be my former professor who taught me research methods. So I am just going to take the liberty to say that I've seen her as a woman in STEM, and she was quite inspiring and path-breaking. That's all I want to say. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Are we going around the room?
Yeah, sorry. Let's do that. But I don't think we can turn the camera. That's okay. I'm going to speak loudly near the mic.
Okay, hi, I'm Devika. I have recently joined the Quantum Hub Consulting as a policy associate. Previously, I was working with Seva Bharat as a researcher.
Hi everyone, I'm Sohani and glad to be a part of all of you. I'm also working with Devika at the TQS, and we've been working very closely with IIT recently. I was also a LAMP fellow before this, and I have a background in political science and psychology.
Hi everyone, so I'm Sridhan. I'm also working with Quantum Hub. I'm creating part of the team.
Hi everyone, I'm Kavya. I'm from IIT Delhi. I'm a PhD student, and my research basically lies at the intersection of STEM and I study how gender from gender perspective.
I'm a master's student at IIT Delhi and I'm a student at the
Hello, I'm Sanskriti. I'm doing Master in Public Policy at the School of Public Policy, IIT Delhi. And I've taken the course from Dr. Nandana Sengupta.
I am just working as a research associate. Hi, my name is Vidya. I will have a research manager. Hi everyone, my name is Suchita. I'm also working as a research associate at IIT.
Yeah, hi, I'm Gayatri. I'm working as a researcher with IIT Delhi project on women in STEM.
So I'm really so I'm also working with this team at IIT Delhi, working on
Same field, same project. My name is Ananya. I'm a project scientist.
Hi everyone, I'm Palvi. I work as the manager for the institution.
Hi everyone, my name is Shreya Ghosh and I'm senior policy analyst at IIT. Hi all, thanks for coming, and I'm Shreya.
I am PhD program manager for the research project at IIT.
Hi, I'm Sanushta. I work as a research associate at IIT. I'm Ramshi. I work as a research associate at IIT. My name is Nisha. I work as a research associate at IIT.
Hi, I'm a final year master in public policy.
Hi everyone, I'm Farina. I work as a research associate at IIT. Everyone, I'm Prakriti. I'm working at the field research associate.
I think this also will lead ideally with everyone. It's okay.
Yes. Okay. And just type a message. I want to from.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here, both in person and online. Quick thank you to Shruti and Sona for inviting me, and it's especially exciting to see one of your former students bloom, someone who I had high expectations of, and yeah, she's delivering the goods. Great. Today I'm going to be talking about women in STEM, and I decided to actually say women in STEM in India, because while Shruti has pointed out that women in STEM is actually something that's been widely studied around the world, the research and the practice efforts in India are nascent. Okay, so let me just dive right in, because so that we are able to have time for questions and discussions later. And I'll start with a quick roadmap of my talk. And so I basically decided to divide it up into 3 parts. The first is a prologue, which is my journey in STEM. Because to a large extent, my motivation to do this research has come from the fact that it's actually personal. So I'm going to talk about that. I'm then going to talk about the core subject of the discussion, which is women in STEM in India. I'm going to start by motivating the discussion and giving a quick overview of the literature. I'll then speak about this project that's funded by Co-Impact that we are situated at IIT Delhi, which is called Fixing the Leak, basically fixing the leak, and for one woman scientist at a time in India. And so I'll go into the details of what we're doing. This is a pretty ambitious project, and I'm hoping that people have thoughts and suggestions on how to make the project better. And then I'm going to do a deep dive into one part of that project, which is I'm going to go into some very basic analysis, but which reveals a lot. Which is basically talking about the supernumerary seat scheme. I don't know how many of you know about it. I'll give details as we go along. And finally, I'll just have a quick epilogue, which is that this is not the only effort. It's actually we are at a time when a lot of these efforts are happening in India. And so for those who are interested, I'm going to bring that up. So let's get started. So my STEM journey. I was the sciencey in school. I don't know how many of you had that label attached to you, but I was one of the sciencies. I did a bachelor's in physics. I then did master's and PhD in econometrics and machine learning. And then I was a postdoc at a computation institute at University of Chicago. And of course, now I'm a faculty in a tech institute. And I thought, let's talk about some of the stereotypes and some of my experiences when I went through all this. And in school, the sciencey label came with me being maybe considered too masculine. Most of my friends, my female friends, took up arts, geeky, of course. On the other hand, as I started my BSc journey, I was too feminine. My clothes, my look, my laughter, my giggles, all considered too feminine. I could not crack the boys club. I had one female faculty to look at. She looked too harrowed for me to go to her and ask for help. Once I went into my grad school, I realized that economics is quite as bad as physics. 100% of the full professors in my department were male, although more than 50% of the PhD students were female. In my postdoc, it became increasingly male. I was the only female postdoc in my lab. So all my peers were male. And of course, at a tech institute, and honestly, even before that, I have noticed that women are relegated to tasks which are referred to now as academic housekeeping, taking notes, booking rooms, making sure the tea is there, etc. I've of course also had to deal with a maternity break. And throughout, I've had to deal with certain levels of sexism, imposter syndrome, lack of role models, and inadequate physical infrastructure. Formatting issue here, but that's fine. So this is my personal kind of motivation, right? But let's move on and put this in the larger context, right? So, there is this gender parity index from the World Economic Forum, which lists India as 135 or 146 countries in terms of gender parity. This is the number that's often quoted, and so it's important that we all in this room know that these are the numbers. So the base rate of STEM faculty in India is female faculty in India is 14%. Older IITs at 11%. Kind of a really low number, especially when I put it into context coming up. So 14% of all scientists and engineers in research institutes are female. Why is this a problem? Because the worldwide average is about 29%. So we are way below the worldwide average. And more interestingly, 43% of STEM graduates are female. So your 43% of STEM graduates are female, but the scientists and engineers close to 40%. So this is a problem, right? We haven't had a female head of the IITs, triple ITs, IISc, ISER, all the decision-making bodies, right? AICT, JEE, GATE, which hold the examination, right? And so, of course, there has been some literature on this topic, but it's primarily from the global north. And I'm going to go into the literature in the next slide. However, it is becoming a burgeoning area of research within India. Not so much econometrics work, not so much quantitative work, but definitely catching the interest and fancy of sociologists and qualitative researchers. I'd like to point everyone towards this fantastic article that my colleague and collaborator Ravinder Kaur and Tanya Krishnan have written in the seminar 2022, December 2022 issue on women in STEM. It's called Securing the League and Shattering the Glass Ceiling. Much of my literature review is informed by this paper. So if you're looking for a quick overview, here's where you can get it. What I'm going to do in terms of literature review is I'm going to categorize some selected papers based on the STEM life cycle. Okay, so we're going to be talking about women's entry into STEM education, their experience within STEM education, whether women stay on, so whether there's retention, and whether they take up leadership. Okay, so a quick literature review because there's a lot more that follows from here. So let's talk about entry. Of course, I'm sure we all understand parental aspirations and investments in female education are highly gendered, right? Women study so much and know more. If there is a male sibling, then investments in female education, female child's education is less, right? So there is work on this. I've got the citations with each of the points I'm making, so I'm not going to go into the citations. Certain disciplines are even considered masculine. So even within engineering, things like mechanical engineering considered more masculine. Biology, biotech, considered feminine. Okay. Location of institutes seem to matter. The parents are perhaps less favorable. They're not that comfortable sending daughters to faraway institutes. And this something which I'm very interested in is the nature of the examination. What does negative marking have to do with gender? And in fact, there is a lot of literature that shows that negative women are affected by negative marking. So the number of questions that a female versus a male student answer when there is a negative marking in multiple choice questions can have major impacts. Okay, Experience on campus, of course, there's a lack of role models. There's been research on infrastructure. I think we've all experienced this. Anyone who studied in India knows that the toilets aren't just, they're not good enough. They're not close enough. It adds to your commute time. You find the best toilets and only go there and only go when it's necessary, right? Like when you have to, right? There's of course norms around socializing. Are you talking to your peers, and is information getting around? And there's this literature on confidence versus competence, right? Men are in fact sometimes shown to be more overconfident, and actually that leads to better results. So basically, maybe women will only apply for a job or a position which they are 100% sure of getting. And men who are like not likely to get a position, but they'll apply and they'll actually get it. And so that leads to the skills. Retention, again, it's the male imaginary of the scientist, most of us. So even when you think of yourself as a scientist, I hadn't thought of myself as a woman in STEM, and even for this lecture, I was like, am I really? And then I was like, no, I am. So there is this imaginary, right? Organizational culture, again, comes back to this idea of what kind of roles are assigned to women within organizations. And of course, there's a dual burden of managing home and work. Work by Professor Farzana Afridi and Professor Kaur on this actually shows that, women get married and their master's degrees are useful because they can tutor their children at home. Right, master's degree in computer science so that you can tutor your child at home. Right? There is some anecdotal evidence of it. And of course, maternity break plays a role. And finally, the question of leadership, right? Again, as women are kept within the organizational periphery because of the kind of roles that are assigned to them, because they end up doing what is known as academic housekeeping and a lot of non-promotable tasks that take up your time but do not add to your CV, means that it's harder for them to rise up in the organization. Networking and mentorship is definitely an issue as well. And there is also literature that shows that female representation in leadership does lead to increased hiring of women. So this is like a broad sketch of the literature. But within STEM, what I'm going to then show you is that what we really need to look at is engineering. So here I've got data from IIT, the All India Higher Education Survey. So we see that, just look at the area of the gray versus the green shaded regions, and you'll notice that it's pretty much 50% for Bachelors of Arts, Bachelors of Commerce, Bachelors of Science. But when it comes to engineering, that slice becomes smaller. Okay, so focus within STEM needs to be on engineering. And why do we care about gender balance in engineering, right? Because of three reasons that we identified. Pretty much everyone knows this. Engineering fields are becoming essential for the future job market. Engineering graduates are increasingly occupying administrative service spaces. So it's not just about engineers, right? And naturally, this would lead to an impact on equity in the north. Okay. So with that, I'm going to go into this project that I'm working on at IIT Delhi with like a large interdisciplinary team, and this is like the meat of my presentation. Okay. So I'm going to talk about this project called Fixing the Leak, One Woman Scientist at a Time. Okay. This is funded by the Co-Impact Gender Fund. It's a 5-year project. It's a pretty ambitious project. It's got a large funding as well. And the approach we are taking in this project is first, we're going to do a life cycle analysis. Like I mentioned, we're looking at the life cycle of a female scientist. Okay, so we're starting with their entry, their experience, their retention, and leadership. I think the most exciting part of the study from my perspective is that it's super interdisciplinary. We basically have these two verticals, quantitative research and qualitative research. And we're going to get evidence from both and come up with, policies and recommendations. And the other really interesting work, which for me is first, is that it's participatory. So we actually are going to have dissemination inbuilt. So maybe at this point, I'll make a quick, I'll tell you about, we have this project. We want to have a logo for this project. We want to spread the word. So we're thinking of holding like a competition within IIT Delhi, right? And when we spread the word, we get people in and we get them to make logos and things like that. And who knows, we may embed a study within that, right? So which is a kind of a participatory approach, which is very interesting. We'll have an advisory committee and we'll get stakeholder inputs. And in the study, the main research gaps that we are planning to address are first and foremost just basic landscape, right? Where are the women, or where are the largest gaps on female faculty, female students, etc. We don't actually have much of this for India. Okay. We also then want to bridge the knowledge gap. So basically add more research on specific topics. I'm going to go into it in the next slide. And perhaps most importantly, based on all our research, we are actually going to design and hopefully implement during the course of the project a gender inclusion framework to actually have evidence-based recommendations for improving female representation in STEM. Okay, I'll quickly talk about the team and then maybe I'll take a breather to see if anyone has any questions before moving forward. So our team is of PIs is Professor Ravinder Kaur, who's a sociologist at IIT Delhi. And the co-PIs along with me are Professor Sangeeta Kohli, who's a professor of mechanical engineering at IIT Delhi, and Professor Narayanan Guru, who's a professor of chemistry in IIT Delhi, and he's also the Dean of Academics. So we're very glad that he became Dean of Academics while we started the study. So we probably can have a genuine impact. And we have a team of wonderful researchers. Swati Sharma and Rohit Muchi are the economists. Gayatri Balu and Ananya, so Rohit, Gayatri and Ananya here in person, they are the sociologists. And we have Khushdeep Malhotra, who's a political geographer. And so it's genuinely an interdisciplinary project. And also I'm so happy that the gender balance here is quite interesting. It's all women. We've got two great men on the team, but yeah, some of the women are calling the shots, right? Which is great. So I'm going to go in next into like what all we're doing in this project, but is there any questions at this point? Because I feel like I've been talking for a bit. Am I going too fast? All good? Can I move on? Okay, great. This last slide, which is about the project, okay, then we do a deep dive into one particular question. Why I want to specifically have this slide in is that you understand the range of questions and methods that we're going to be using to answer this kind of a question. To give you a sense of the scale of the project and the kind of the ambition of the project, okay? So consider the different life cycle stages. There's entry, experience, retention, and leadership. Within entry, what we are hoping to do is actually look at JEE, that's the Joint Entrance Examination data. And using that data, we want to take a look at the impact of certain themes. Okay, the most highlighted of those themes and most relevant is the supernumerary seats theme, which I'll go into more details of because that's the deep dive I'm going to do. But we also want to look at the impact of negative marking at a large scale, right? Because we actually have certain sections of the JEE question paper where there was no negative marking, and then there was suddenly a large amount of negative marking. And if you have that data and you just get a sense of how many questions are women answering, what does that do? So we have fingers crossed we've applied for this data. In terms of the qualitative approach, we'll be interviewing parents, incoming students, students who made it but didn't take it, and coaching center. In terms of experience, this is another very exciting part of the project for me. We are actually trying to run a bunch of lab experiments. We want to look at things like aspirations. Okay, so if we what kind of institutes do males and females think that they can get into for higher study? What if we do a simple tweak to an admission form, and which kind of encourages women or shows them some role models? What happens then? We're looking at questions of imposter syndrome. Where do women think, if you think of this distribution, do they think that they're above the distribution? I mean, what are they thinking of themselves? Right? We're looking at questions of team dynamics as well. All of this through an experimental lens. In the qualitative set of questions, I'm very excited about, especially two. One is the campus mapping. We actually plan to do like this GI-based campus mapping to see what are the spaces women occupy and what are the spaces that men occupy. How are they imagining the campus, and what does that do to your experience being there? And lab and classroom observation studies, where we can take a look at maybe mechanical engineering and biotech. Right? Please, how different are the gender dynamics of these places? When it comes to the question of retention, we've got alumni data. We're going to do metadata of all IITs and get a sense of what is the just mapping out where are the women, right? And maybe look at time use surveys. We'll be doing faculty and alumni interviews. And again, for leadership, I'm quite excited about this possibility of looking at citation data. We can do web scraping and get data for all the papers that all the faculty in IIT have written. Who are their collaborators? What are their citations? We can actually start seeing, are women more likely to collaborate with other women on campus? Are they out collaborating with others? Is there a break due to maternity? Get a sense of their age and things like that. So I think we're that's kind of a network analysis bit, which we're quite excited. Okay, so that's about the larger project. For the first time, we are going to now do a deep dive. I mean, we've not presented these results to anyone, so I'm hoping this is of interest to some of you. And I'm going to deep dive into the supernumerary seat scheme. Okay, for those of you who don't know, and I didn't know, so I'm guessing some people here don't know about the supernumerary seat scheme. Of course, we know there's a skewed gender balance at the IIT. I thought I'd start by telling you about these three ways of defining students or those who or applicants. Okay, they're the registered applicants. These are the ones who register for IIT JEE, the JEE exam. So that women are about between 18 to 20% of all out of all the people who register to take the exam. Women make about 18 to 20%. Qualified are the ones who make the cut, right? And here it falls. So it's 12 to 15% women who about make the cut. Okay, that's fine. So but you're qualified. So now you are eligible for a seat at the IIT. But allotted are the ones, are the students who, after being qualified, they go for counseling, and then they are offered certain departments, certain locations, etc., and then they actually choose to get admitted into an IIT. And that's been ranging around 7 to 9%. So the number that people use is 8%. So there's 8% of female representation in IIT. Okay. However, the median CGPA of girls in IIT Delhi, according to a study in 2012, was nearly one entire point higher than the median for boys. And it turns out that actually the average rank for girls is lower, but the median CGPA for girls is higher. So this narrative of quality will go down if we let girls in. So first of all, that's busted to a certain extent here. So the supernumerary scheme was started. It got the approval of MHRD. There was a committee of folk from IIT who came up with the scheme, and with the aim of increasing female representation in all IIT classrooms to at least 20% by the year 2020. but without substantially affecting the seats for male students. This is important. So this actually becomes it's kind of an important talking point. And this implementation was phased out between 2018 to 2020. Okay. And so fine, that sounds great. And but there are certain questions. We have questions. So the questions are: A, what is the context within which, the broader context within which the scheme is set? What is the algorithm that is being used? What are the steps that are what are the details of the process by which the supernumerary scheme is being rolled out? So we have to unpack the algorithm, and then we want to see, okay, overall, how is the scheme performed, and are there variations by locations and distance? Okay? So that's the main research objectives here. Methodology is super simple. We have got JE reports. This is not a sample. We literally have the population. We know the number of women in different IITs across years. And we're just doing a simple trends analysis and cross-section analysis. So it's really simple, but there's a story to tell. So let's get to it. Let's start by just setting the context. Okay, this plot, I don't know, I think if you guys could see this, it basically tells the same story as the previous plot, that if you look at the percentage share of female students in different degree programs, we've got, and you want 50% as kind of gender parity. MA, MSc, BA, BSc are all doing great, right? It's MBA, MTech, and then BTech at the very bottom, right? So, okay, we have already established this, but one more way of visualizing the fact that BTech ratios of women in BTech degrees are low. I'm not sure if people can see this plot too well, but let me summarize it. So this again looks at the same thing, a proportion of female students in different degree programs, but it now divides it by caste category. And the key message over here is that the ST category is actually underperforming all other categories. So it's not just the story of women. There is also this intersectional aspect to this, where and this is something that I have personally also experienced as a faculty member, that when we are looking at CVs for faculty candidates, and we're looking at CVs of students, and we look at the ST candidates, almost overwhelmingly male. And so you see this intersectionality issue coming up. Now, the second important, context setting here is that it's by discipline. So the lines on top are computer science, and so the computer science is actually doing decently well in terms of number of women, and then below that is electronics, and at the very bottom we've got mechanical engineering, civil, and electrical engineering. Okay, we know this, but I guess we all intuitively know this, but we have numbers to show that. Okay, so that's the context, and we need to increase the number of women coming into IITs. But remember, we do not want it to be at the cost of the boys, right? Because I mean, there are all kinds of implications, right? So what I thought I'll do is, this was actually not easy, because it was really difficult to find any details of the implementation of the scheme. We only found one document from IIT Delhi, but this has been the scheme has been implemented across all IIT, all 23 IIT. So based on that one document, I'm kind of trying to unpack the algorithm based. We'll first start by looking at what are the types of seats and cutoffs at IITs, and then we look at then we look at the potential scenarios that can occur. Okay, so some very basic notation. Okay, so my first line is saying that the supernumerary scheme. So before the supernumerary scheme, N pre is the total number of seats that were there, right? And you had N subscript M pre, that's the number of male students in a class, and N subscript F pre, which is the number of female students in the class before the scheme started. The cutoff was obviously a function of N pre. How many C's there are? The cutoff is a function of that. Okay. Simple. N post is again the same thing, but there's subtle difference. Okay. You have the N post is N and then subscript MF. What I mean by MF is it's gender neutral, plus NF, which is female only seats. Okay, again, the cutoff is only a function of the total number of seats, N post. Okay, so let's quickly, the algorithm, basically what it does is that it says that the number of gender neutral seats after the scheme is equal to the number of male seats before the scheme. And number of female only seats after the scheme is 1/4 the number of male only seats before. So when it's this, you can do a quick calculation to see that this basically adds up to the proportion of females being 20% or higher. Okay, so just a few definitions. So NMF post is gender neutral seats. So now we're in the era of post supernumerary. So we've got gender neutral seats and we've got female only seats. A number of new seats have been created, right? N post minus N pre is the new number of seats that have been created. And these are the supernumerary seats. Okay. And I'm now introducing this additional term NF on comma cutoff, which is the number of females who make the cutoff. Okay. This is important because there are two potential scenarios that depend on the number of females who make the cutoff. Okay. Notice one thing, as the number of seats have increased, the cutoff will naturally decrease, cutoff will become lower, right? So even men will benefit. Just from one perspective that even men are benefiting because they have to be part of the top 50 or something like that. Okay? So there are two potential scenarios. One is that the number of females who make the cutoff is less than the number of female seats, right? That's the first column. NF cutoff is less than NF post scheme, okay? So what happens is, there are only NF post minus NF cutoff beneficiaries, okay? So this means that if this number is small, there's actually not that many beneficiaries. The women who make the cutoff, first, they fill the female only seats, but they are not, there's no reduction in standards for those who would have made the cutoff anyway. It's only for those who would not have made the cutoff for whom the cutoff is basically reduced, right? And so is there an effect on the standard in the classroom? Yes. In the case that there are fewer females than female only seats, fewer females who make the cutoff than female only seats, there is a reduction in the standard. Is there any effect on the male students? None. Okay. This is important because there is a seat stealer narrative that's come up with this supernumerary scheme. And so it's important to know that in the first scenario, there is no seat stealing. The number of male seats has not changed, right? Some women, there are now female only seats, but that has not, they are not taking away from the number of seats that men have. The next scenario is if you actually have more women who make the cutoff than women or than female only seats. Okay, are there any beneficiaries? No, no beneficiaries of the scheme because there are more than enough women who make the cutoff. So there is no reduction of standards. And is there an effect on male students? Yes, there can be an effect on male students. And I've kind of quantified it here. But it also says very clearly in the document that if this becomes the norm, the scheme stops. The scheme will go on as long as the first scenario, as long as you're in the first scenario. Okay, so these are the potential scenarios. And so this is important because there are some implications of this, because we actually didn't find any detailed account of the supernumerary seat scheme. So there is a definite lack of transparency regarding the implementation details. You don't have it for most IITs. We thankfully found it on an IIT Delhi website. Wording is very complicated. Beneficiary, non-beneficiary, female only, supernumerary. Like there are so many different terms that you're playing around with over here that so if I'm a female student who makes it into this say computer science and I actually made it without and I'm a non-beneficiary, right? I may still be, but I'm still filling in the female only seats, and so there can come with that the stigma of being that girl who took away the seat or the girl who is a beneficiary, so who got an undue advantage, right? So this is a complicated wording. And the design is anchored to the number of male students in the year before the implementation, which seems a bit arbitrary. And I think it might be better to have anchored it on total seats. And in the classroom, I think this can have impacts, right? So there is this idea that, okay, girls are seat stealers. So there is an actual narrative there, that there is a lowering of standards. We see that this is not the case. It may not be the case that standards are being massively lowered. And of course, as this can lead to women feeling more of an imposter syndrome. Okay, so that's unpacking the algorithm. I think it's an important piece of the puzzle for us. But I think we can now actually move to seeing, did this work? Did this scheme work? And we can see this here. So the blue line on top is the percentage of females who registered for the JEE. The green line at the bottom is the percentage of females who were finally allocated, and the orange line in the middle is the percentage of females who qualify. So remember, difference between register and qualify is those who clear the JEE. What is the difference between qualify and allot? What the difference here is that did the I qualified for the JEE, but I decided not to go to an IIT, right? And so that would lead to a reduction in allotment. So basically, then I went to another engineering institute, maybe closer to home. So first and foremost, when you see this difference, one idea when you're trying to explain away this difference, one natural thought that comes to mind maybe social norms, maybe its location of institute, etc. But we see that once supernumerary scheme was introduced, the percentage of allotted girls actually goes above the percentage of qualifying girls. So that means once allotted to a prestigious IIT or just like a prestigious institute like an IIT in the stream that they are interested in, more girls are actually taking this up. They are joining IIT. So first, we see that the scheme is actually working. We are actually at a stage right now that almost 20% of students in IIT classrooms across the board are women. So that's great. But is that the whole story? It's not. This is the next two slides I think are possibly the two most interesting for me. Let's take a look at what happens when we consider there are these zonal IITs, right? These are the big ones, the IIT Delhi, Bombay, Madras, Kharagpur, Roorkee, Kanpur, etc. Right? You got these 7 zonal IITs. This is also whenever any student takes the entrance exam, they are associated with a zone. Okay, so we know which zones they've taken the exam from, and we also then know where they've joined, right? So here we see that I think many of us will not be surprised to see that even before the scheme, Madras, which is in the south of India, was performing better than all other zones in terms of the percentage of girls admitted to IIT. And by 2022, Madras is actually a little bit above 20%, and other zonal IITs have caught up except IIT Kharagpur. Okay, that red one there is IIT Kharagpur. So that's interesting. They're struggling to make 20% even in 2022. Turns out that IIT Kharagpur has the largest number of seats. And so if they're not making it, that probably explains why the previous plot is just shy of 20%, right? So large number of seats over there. So what's happening? Are there fewer women who are taking the exam from these places, right? And so I'm keeping the same plot that I used before here. And let's take a look at the right. So here you actually see percentage of girls allotted from different IITs. So this is where they took the exam from, the zone that they took the exam from. Madras, flying high, right? It's been there on the top from the beginning, even in terms of where the girls are taking the exam from. But the second here is Kharagpur. The proportion of girls taking the exam is highest after Madras from Kharagpur. But Kharagpur has, so this is just immediately a very interesting case study. What's going on? One quick, just a assumption from my side, something we need to study is it because the campus is really located in the middle of nowhere? Is how important is that? We don't really know. So we or maybe it's the streams and the number of seats in the different kind of streams in IIT Kharagpur. We need to look into this. Okay. But this is an interesting puzzle that we found. Another quick note here, there are zonal IITs and there are non-zonal IITs. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here. Basically, we see that pretty much everywhere you're hitting 20%. And we see a couple of IITs where from before, so on the left-hand side, that red line on top is Hyderabad. And on the right-hand side, the red line on top on the is Palakkad. So we also see a north-south kind of a divide. We see Madras, Hyderabad, Palakkad, where this 20% is being beaten. And it's part of even before this introduction of the scheme, you had more women getting admitted there. So another clear regional variation that's coming out of the data. And then this is the last slide of results. Again, an interesting one, and it was quite interesting for me. Here, what we've done is we have taken, this is the 100% is all the female only seats. Okay, so the left, top left is IIT Madras, top right is IIT Delhi, bottom left is IIT Bombay, bottom right is IIT Kharagpur. Okay, and what we've got, the different bar plots refer to different disciplines. The first one is chemical biotech for the different IITs, because biotech was not offered in IIT Madras and IIT Bombay. We wanted to have biotech because it's one of the ones where you have a lot of female representation. And the one on the absolute right is mechanical. Okay. So why this plot to me is very important is if you take a look at, say, chemical or biotech, or even CSC, so computer science for Madras and Delhi, you see that most of the female only seats are non-beneficiary. So the green is non-beneficiary, that no cutoff was reduced for these girls to come in, right? And the blue, the dark blue, is that proportion of girls who actually had their cutoff reduced in order to make this discipline. And we see, as expected, that mechanical engineering is mostly there has been a reduction, right, in cutoff. But for chemical, biotech, computer science, really not that much of a reduction. So what does this mean? That there are not that many beneficiaries here. You can't say that standards were lower to get girls in. Really, you really can't say that. You have a few girls who are making this cut. The other interesting thing, and I don't know how many of you notice it, or am I just like reading into this because I love Delhi, is that you don't see that much that many beneficiaries in Delhi. That means girls are actually choosing to come to Delhi, which is also an interesting kind of a factor, something that probably needs to be explored. Like they are being allotted to Delhi and they're choosing Delhi, right? But when you see like electrical in Bombay, 100% of the female-only seats goes to beneficiaries. 100% of the women in that class had to have a reduced cutoff. So just think of how it feels to be a girl in this class. Or maybe let's just look at civil. What does it feel like being a girl in civil engineering? In Madras and Delhi, you are being potentially wrongly thought of as a seat stealer, as someone who's reducing standard, who has just got a benefit, but actually it's completely wrong. Because you're pretty much, very few girls have had that. But on the other hand, when you look at civil and the same discipline in Bombay and Kharagpur. Yeah, possibly the standards have been lowered. Okay, so these are like the overall findings, and I thought I'll quickly summarize them before moving on. So in the larger ecosystem, we see engineering is especially behind BTechs. This is exacerbated for scheduled tribes and is exacerbated for certain disciplines like mechanical engineering. In terms of the algorithm, the language is super complicated and non-intuitive, and it really masks this issue of beneficiary versus non-beneficiary and reduction of standards and things like that. The scheme has overall performed well. It's been successful. It's actually managed to get more girls into the classroom. I talked about what it means for allotment versus qualification. And we see these regional variations. We see that Madras, the southern IITs are doing better. But there is a really interesting puzzle here. What's going on with IIT Kharagpur, right? Why is it sending in a larger number of girls, but getting the fewest into their campus? There is a lot going on in terms of discipline and location. So overall, I had like these few recommendations. One is that the algorithm should really be clarified. So by the authorities, reporting should be improved. By the way, if you go into the data, it's a mess. Sometimes they report supernumerary seats. Sometimes they report female-only seats. Sometimes they're calling it beneficiaries. It's just super complicated to even parse the data. It's important to break this narrative of lower standards and seat stealing. We have seen that this is not uniformly the case. But one additional important point is that there are beneficiary students. When there are reservations for or affirmative action for scheduled caste or scheduled tribe students, they actually get support on campus. They get support in terms of maybe they have to. They have lower GPA requirements. They are also getting additional support. But we did not find any documentation that said that the girls who get in through the supernumerary scheme as beneficiaries are getting these additional benefits. So this is something that's actually become an important point of discussion in IITs. The IITs are becoming more diverse. You are now getting in the same class students who have obtained a much lower rank, coexisting with students with the highest rank. And what are you doing for those students, right? And I think there's not, we maybe are doing a decent job of getting a foot in the door, but are we providing them with enough support so that they are able to be successful going forward? Okay, so those are the broad recommendations. And of course, yeah, the intersectional level is important. And with that, I come to my last slide, where I'll quickly kind of go over the fact that this is one important kind of initiative that we are taking at IIT Delhi. But this is kind of a moment for women in STEM. Okay, from the policy perspective, there are a lot of efforts from DST. There is Gati, Gender Advancement. In technology, and yeah, I'm very bad with acronyms. But there's all this. There are Inspire fellowships for female scientists. Publications. I urge you all to. Maybe some of you have already seen this website, Bias Watch, which on a regular basis publishes quick numbers on seminars, speakers, attendees, panels. How many women are there? What is the base rate, etc. Seminar Magazine, December 2022, actually came out with an issue on women in STEM. That's where Professor Kaur and Tanya had their piece. So if anyone's interested, I'd urge you to look at that. I also found these nice fellowships and grants that one of my colleagues referred me to. There is this Rukma Bai grant, Stories of Women in STEM. Very interesting little initiative to kind of disseminate the stories, because you also need that narrative out there in public. And there is a short film grant on women in STEM that we are also considering getting in touch with. So these kind of things are going on in the ecosystem. And I also wanted to just make a quick kind of a comment about other related ongoing projects. Kavya, my students here, she's working for a PhD thesis on how COVID-19 has affected the gender issues within the engineering education background. So that's using COVID-19 as a specific lens, because it's interesting, right? Because it's such a big shock and to the system. And what does that do to female education? And specifically engineering, because you have labs, you have maths. Some of this stuff is really not conducive to online teaching. And what happens there? I am also doing a lot of work on women and tech. And I think this is also really important. Somehow when we're thinking of female labor force participation, we're thinking of maternity, we're thinking of mobility, women and technology, how do they intersect? How many female researchers are actually looking at these questions? I think one of the conversations Sona and I were discussing, having, right? So some of my other work is in algorithmic bias and street safety rating. So when you're crowdsourcing data, and you're supposing you're crowdsourcing data for women's safety, there are so many apps for this right now. Are you really, is your data, crowdsourced data, how likely is it that it's coming from women? And if it's coming from women, what kind of women are some, and crowdsourcing? So what happens is you're thinking crowdsourcing is equal to big data is equal to machine learning, is equal to like fantastic prediction. But no, they can be biased, right? We're looking at questions of fairness, accountability, transparency, and ethics frameworks, which is again part of this larger algorithmic bias kind of effort, and gender. Some of the work that Shruti is doing kind of falls into that my student here. And I have another PhD student looking at digital skilling for women. What is the effect that for me? I also want to say a quick shout out to Rohit for fantastic plots that because of which I could present all the supernumerary results. So yeah, that's about it. Thank you so much for the time and comments, questions, and suggestions.
Thank you so much. I just want to add for everyone, I know I'm going to go back to that presentation. It's going to be up on our website along with a video recording, because I think I would want to go back to those graphs. I'm sure a lot of us want to. But thank you so much. And I think all of us are lucky that we are the first audience to get to see these results. I didn't know the supernumerary scheme either. So open for questions. Anyone? Yeah, I'll do that.
I have a question. So in your slide about qualitative, quantitative research, where you talked about energy retention, issue like one experience. Yeah. So in the qualitative side, you talked about parents that you will be interviewing for this, and faculty or alumni. I want to know whether dropouts is also one indicator in your. Are you looking at that aspect as well? That people who actually do get into IIT, if you are looking at IITs or engineering college, what is the dropout rate for women or men, or what is higher, what is lower?
This is a great question. So, like I said, there's also been this DST Gati initiative that's actually just trying to capture this. I think, if I'm not mistaken, just trying to capture this data. You just need the data. How many women are entering and how many of them are persistent, right? So this is part of this landscaping. When I say that we want to do landscaping, we just want to get the basic. We don't need to run a crazy structural econometric exercise. We just want to fill in on the gaps. Yes, we are very much interested in dropouts. But in terms of the qualitative bit, we are hopeful that we'll be able to, run this kind of a design where we'll actually, when we speak to the students, ask them, okay, did any of your friends drop out? Did any of your friends get in and didn't take seat? And then we'll actually then do a purposes sampling, because obviously we can't get a sampling frame for people who dropped out, right? But we can purposively find these kind of cases, and then we'll actually be interviewing them, because that is an important aspect of it.
Because you also mentioned that, in your intersectional vertical, you said that they do get there, but what are the support system that IITs are providing? So even with the dropouts, I'm thinking that when did they drop out? Was it the first year they drop out, or whether the second year? Because first year is, as I understand, that the courses are very similar for all the first year students in science, engineering, but then you start specializing. So I'm just thinking that, when did they drop out?
Right, right. Absolutely. Like, these are exactly the kind of questions. So we literally want to find out the little things that are causing these big changes. So there, if you already have a small student female population, they become kind of all the more precious. So even the little things that are causing them to drop out. For example, maybe, we don't first of all need to have a hypothesis, right? It could be a hypothesis that at the beginning is when they're the most vulnerable. Right? I think there is some work, again, I think it's part of the 2012 study that I quoted, that it says that your first semester CGPA is highly predictive of how you do in the end. So then maybe that's like that initial first semester that you have to be like really careful, and you have to make sure that you don't kind of lose them. Especially when in the first semester you're already kind of scared, you're away from home, and you suddenly see all these guys, all your professors are men. Then we have like toppers posters, huge posters of toppers everywhere, and all men. What does that do to your initial kind of confidence? Yes, and absolutely that's not something that we are interested in. We will.
Thank you.
So I'm particularly interested in the project's objective to study what specific government role models. I think I have first experience with that. Could you elaborate on the experimental design?
So I can tell you a little bit. So there are two particular projects that we're thinking. So for the experimental design to look at role models, this is what we're thinking. We're thinking of getting male and female students in. And we are telling them to maybe tell us if you were to do a postgraduate degree, which is your dream institute. Okay. Then we are also planning to provide them with some kind of admissions related material. So in that material, you have some basics like, what are the courses you're studying, or the rank, etc. And then we're planning to share with them like a list of like role models, not role models, alumni. Alumni at the institute are here, and you put photos. And one which will basically be more male heavy, which is the reality of the world, and one where we'll actually pick more female photos there. We go and find the female role models, alumni who've done it, and put photos of them. And we are also toying with the idea of maybe adding that language, that nudge, female women and persons of color are more are encouraged to apply or something. We make that explicit. And so one experimental group will not. We'll just get like a regular admissions packet, and one will get an admissions packet that we tweak to have this gender angle. And in order to make this, because the problem with this is that you still have to incentivize truth telling, right? That people, because they're just filling in this form, they can not reveal their truth. And so then we are thinking of actually reaching out to certain alumni and actually for selected students, organize like mentorship, like one-on-one session or something like that. So there's an actual cost to selecting something that you wouldn't go to. So the idea is that am I more likely to select by comparing male and female in one group, the group which is just shown the non-tweaked admissions packets. We know that we can ask them for their GPAs and their ranks. And then we can just compare, are men more likely to select top 10 and women more likely to maybe hedge their bets, and then we can compare the two female groups to see if the role models help. So that's the one on role model. Imposter syndrome, we are thinking of something like we give a set of quizzes to both male and female participants, and then at the end of it we give them like the average score on this quiz like this is this much. Where would you place yourself? How do you think you did? Right. And then in that way, even thinking of playing around with negative marking, not sure yet. Yeah, I'm excited.
You know, one thing that I wanted to just highlight, you know, I don't know if I've noticed or whether I'm looking at it correctly. Because Bombay and Nagpur is in some way mirroring each other. You see that in Bombay, IIT, it's just it's all seats that are you know, like girls are taking up those seats, and in Kharagpur the offer is not being taken up by girls, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, it is. I know you said something like that about the location of the IIT. But is it also to do with some systems in place in terms of how the ICC functions, how the harassments are addressed, how the women's redressal mechanism is? Because those are things that are very, very important for IITs. And in Bombay, as far as I know, the Bombay IIT is very generous campus, and Kharagpur is the most misogynist campus.
Okay, so you're adding to it.
So that's why I'm just very that, and in terms of and so maybe just like what systems are in place, how they work. There's also a connection between how you look at the faculties, because you said that the fact percentage has increased, but I'm just also being have the data. Where is it in the arts departments? Humanities are expanding more across the IITs, and new IITs, bigger of humanities departments. So those and they are actually absorbing a lot of them. So that is something that one needs to look at. And that makes the campus gender sensitive, but not only in IITs where the power relations are always biased against the communities.
Right.
So maybe those things, some of those things. And the last thing is about students' programs, PhDs versus masters. So whether there are more women in PhDs, which will be the case, and not exactly masters, because of many perceptions around PhDs. So process, time is better for me. So I think maybe those things, I'm sure you're doing it. Since it is very IIT focused because of the data, so that is one. But I think if you look at the private engineering colleges, we find more disastrous results.
Right. We look at private engineering colleges.
I'm sure, but yeah, if you ever want to expand it to
So, but it's interesting, but 30% of graduates in engineering are women, but only 8% of the IIT. So actually,
it's all regional engineering.
Yeah,
colleges.
exactly.
You have quite a few good ICs.
Exactly.
Not better than these 4 IITs, but better than
But it's many of the new
IITs. So girls try to join that. And then there are also private engineering colleges for studying that.
Yes.
And there you can also do this, I don't know, this regional thing, south versus north.
Yes.
There's always a southern this thing towards women still. That is a bias, and we do it.
Right.
Much more than others. So those things can come out. And why is it happening? What is it that is working? The sociological bit, because you have as an audit, exactly all the ideas about why what works in south and doesn't work in north. So those things, it's very interesting.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much. So just to quickly address some of this. So so it actually is almost like this exercise was just something we just do like a few plots to see what happened. We're seeing an entire kind of narrative emerging. And exactly what you said, like case studies are emerging. What's going on in IIT Kharagpur? And yeah, we do know that IIT Bombay is extra, they're taking a lot of proactive steps.
Absolutely.
Right? And IIT Madras as well is doing a lot of steps for faculty.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, but it's also interesting that Delhi is also
I think, because it's in the middle of so much.
Yeah.
The discourse and the awareness and consciousness is
Right.
so high. Yeah. Kharagpur, again, it's it's not suburban, but it's not a metropolitan.
Yes, exactly.
And searching there is also very high. Given that the state is also kind of that's some ways of functioning. So.
No, so in fact, we had not thought of going to IIT. We were thinking, okay, we'll do some comparative studies with Ahmedabad University, we'll do something with IIT Madras. But
Faculty composition,
absolutely.
the gender faculty composition by campus. That also.
That's part of the metadata analysis. That's what we want to do. Basically, one of the things we're just thinking, we just go to all the IIT websites and just get this data because no one really knows. So just shed that light. A quick note on the private and the regional. I think Kavya's work will. So Kavya, my PhD student, she's going to look at that. She's not just looking at it. In fact, she may entirely exclude. I don't know, but definitely she's looking at the private versus public colleges location in terms of being in metropolitan and outside. And so we are. That's part of the larger research agenda. Yeah, we are addressing that. I think for this co-impact project, we are not going beyond this, but definitely part of the larger.
That's fantastic.
I have a question which is related to a little bit to the kind of options that are available with a particular stream. So from what I understand with mechanical engineering, even though a lot of IITs don't end up actually doing anything that they study in the campus, but you know, there's this at least perception that I mean, like they switch to other streams in some subjects. Yeah, many of them. But I think the question that I had is that is there a perception, for example, when you're from mechanical engineering, you think that you have to go to some factory and you know you have to do an internship there, etc., etc. So it's seen unfit for women by their families. And I wonder if there is any intervention that can be done which actually gives information about career options after these streams, and the fact that many times your training doesn't actually limit you to what you're actually studying, which could take care of some of these concerns early on. And I know that flexibility is something that, of course, requires a completely institutional change, and of course, very difficult for institutions to plan how faculty will be, you know, staffed, etc., etc. But I wonder if there's anything around.
Right. So quick, so like great points all around. I mean, first of all, yeah, I get students from mechanical, textile, etc., who take my statistics classes because they want to learn coding and get a job as a coder. Correct. So I mean, that's just what I have personally experienced as well. In fact, the literature, when I went through the literature review, and there are certain masculine disciplines that actually stops that entry, right? Yes. So the factory floor is a male space. Yes. Right. And so that's in the beginning, maybe parents will not want to. Then, so first of all, there is some literature on this. Right. And in terms of designing an intervention, that's kind of interesting. So basically, kind of like so I wonder at what stage I would do this intervention. I have to do it before.
Speaking from personal experience, my husband is an IIT Bombay mechanical engineer who went to Asian Paints to do his internship. I was completely, you know, like always kept saying that it's so boring to work in factories or policy eventually. But I mean, I've heard from all of his friends as well that, you know, there is this perception even on campus that, oh, like there is this masculine sort of association, but then eventually nobody is really doing that, you know, I mean, very few people have actually stuck to the this thing. So I wonder whether there's merit in giving that information early on, that it will not limit what you do in life.
That's really interesting. I don't know if maybe we can have this as a part of a question and like, did you know that? Right? But I don't think we can design a full scale intervention on this because how do we find the target population to whom? But so glad you specifically talked about mechanical engineering, because one of our lab studies is where we'll actually be sitting and observing students in a lab setting in mechanical engineering. And our co-PI, Professor Kohli, is very well respected female faculty in mechanical engineering. So we kind of that's one of the reasons to be a female faculty in mechanical engineering, and she runs her lab, right? And so we actually, that's going to be one of our sites of study, because I think mechanical engineering makes that interesting domain. I don't know if we can figure out an intervention, but sure, I mean, we're going to think about it. And it is kind of interesting to know. Maybe we can study dropouts.
Exactly. Or maybe like a huge alumni survey of what these people are actually doing.
We actually have some of that, so we can analyze that data. That's a great point. So just making that data available.
Right.
That sounds really good. Yeah, yeah.
Civil is another one like that.
Huh?
Civil.
Civil as well, yeah.
I have a very favorite anecdote. I'm sorry, I always say this, and it's a personal. This one is somewhere around mid-90s, where my elder sister's friend was appearing for a counseling after she qualified for the trial. And she applied in civil. And the counselors actually told her that, oh, how can you see yourself as a civil engineer? And she was wearing a sari to her counseling. She was asked that, will you be able to climb the ladders in your attire that you're wearing now? And why don't you opt for architecture instead? It's a personal anecdote, and she of course went for mechanical. She went for mechanical. She's a faculty, Kharagpur IIT. Of course, yes.
She's someone we need to speak with.
But yeah, she was.
No, that's great. First of all, we would love to speak with her. So I'll get in touch with you about that. I think one interesting thing that the data showed us is that you're not seeing that many beneficiaries in civil. In mechanical, we're seeing it. So I think that maybe those norms are changing, or maybe that information is out there that civil has actually changed, because civil engineering is also
in
seen.
mid-90s that I'm talking.
Yeah, yeah. But maybe like that perception remains. But maybe once you are allotted to a civil engineering department, maybe these girls are actually going and reading up and they think, okay, it's really not that masculine, and we don't know. So that's another like interesting kind of insight that the simple data analysis has just thrown out for us, is that civil is actually, it's actually electrical after mechanical, not civil.
Can I come in here? My question, I exited engineering, not because I wanted to do coding, but because I did not want to do coding. So I just want to say that there is a recruitment bias and there is a bias in growth. So I don't know if that's something you're looking at, placement data, if that's something you're looking at. So I categorically did not want to do coding. So you could do trickle mechanical, but most women end up doing, most men, like she said, also end up doing not the core jobs. And like Shona said, my mother is an electrical engineer, and she was also asked these questions. Can you climb and like, check the meter box and things like that. But she did end up doing a job that required her to be on site a lot. So then there are some of us who would like to do that, but we are kept out of it because of the bias.
Yes, yes. So this is a very interesting point that you're raising. So basically you're saying, maybe there are all kinds of options after engineering.
Yeah.
And maybe there is a gender preference for some of the options, but maybe those jobs are not enough companies maybe come with those jobs on campus, thereby kind of forcing an exodus for those who are interested in those kind of other jobs. So what are the kinds of, that's a really interesting point, and I think we should definitely study it.
I was just wondering, because we're talking about how the scheme has changed the enrollment and the allotment of seats to women in colleges. I was just wondering if we are trying to capture the attitudes that men have towards this in campuses, and also try to see how it varies across regions, because Madras already had a higher number of women candidates in their classroom. So if we try to capture those, and maybe if we are able to do that, then how do we inform them that things might have not been like the way they thought it has, that they are not stealers and stuff like that. So your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so great question. So a couple of points here. So just so I'll take your first question, second question first. So basically, how do you change attitude? I think part of the point of doing this research is try to change the attitude. Get this word out there. We probably want to get this paper out, go to more places, speak about our results, just having a little bit more clarity on the algorithm. That's it. Right? Don't call it just supernumerary seats and you're like, oh, all the girls are taking it. Just that clarity of communication. So that's and that's why. So the co-impact gender fund, the ones who have funded this project, they actually want to see a change on the ground. So part of our efforts through this project is actually to not just do the research, but get the word out there, disseminate, and be that change, right? So that's pretty much in our ethos, okay, in terms of seeing that change. The first one about how our male students, that's very much part of our plans. And we're saying that we're going to interview students. 100% we're going to ask them about their thoughts on the supernumerary scheme. And we are not just interviewing female students, we will be interviewing both male and female students. So we are 100% going to ask about this, because this is just, it's just so, if I have friends who are female alumni from IIT, and when I told them about the supernumerary scheme, they said, you know, we feel cheated because, you know, we got in on our merit, and now girls are getting in without, and so even like alumni are upset about the supernumerary scheme, because they're like, oh, now when we go for an interview, our employers and interviewers are thinking that, oh, they got a, you know, they got a easy pass. And so even alumni are getting affected. So we need to change this narrative. And we 100% have to ask the questions about supernumerary, especially also to alumni.
Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting because Mumbai is a gender sensitive campus, and Madras for a long time had female students. So that would be interesting to compare these campuses and stuff.
Let's see how much we can do. Possibly that's something that we can work on. Yeah.
Another question I wanted to add. So when the supernumerary seats were launched, along with that, they started having these interventions that. So they called these girls for counseling on campus, and they made them talk to students so a female student who was already in her third year doing mechanical engineering, to make the parents basically, because the girls are not making this decision that I want to enroll in this. The parents that are making them. So to make them understand that, oh, she doesn't have to go to a factory and work in remote locations. She can have a desk job, because the main the motivation behind choosing CS is getting a desk job for a female candidate. And also I read this piece by it's by student publication at IIT, where a girl said that, oh, I enrolled in engineering because there was a girl that was talking to me, and also alumni, they call alumni also, who are mechanical or civil, who are working at tech companies, to make these parents understand that it's not necessary. Like, it's not the old age now, people have evolved.
This is a great point. So another thing that we have been thinking about is just like, how many things do we do? But there's one really interesting thing that happens, that there is this specific female specific counseling that happens. Where girls come in and all the girls who took the exam from IIT Delhi zone will come into the IIT Delhi campus for counseling, and we can run some interventions there. We can, so your kind of interventions there to see how does it affect their decisions. At the end of this, I have to sit and write everything down.
It's also important because, you know, and meeting the economist's point is basically that there are no more factories.
Yeah.
That is being expanded. It's actually the tech and the sector that is being expanded. Jobs are out there. There are no factories. So obviously, no, I'm so thankful that we did this, and thank you so much for this great presentation. I look forward to the more mature findings, and look forward to keeping in touch to know what is happening.
No, absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Great questions, and so nice to see an audience full of bright-eyed and bushy-tailed girls. So yeah, so lovely. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you everyone for joining.